Didn't get everything you wanted this holiday season? Spring Creek Model Trains can help. With a huge inventory featuring today's top manufacturers, Spring Creek Model Trains is sure to have just what you're looking for. Check them out in Deschler, Nebraska, on their website, springcreekmodeltrains.com, or come shop their huge selection at the Railroad Hobby Show in the Stroh Building, January 24th and 25th in West Springfield, Massachusetts. Or give them a call at 402-365-7628. If you're looking to bring more realism to your layout industries, the place to go is the Railroad Hobby Show in West Springfield, Massachusetts to see Tully models. You'll find Kevin in the Mallory Building with a wide variety of products from Industrial Modeler Supply and Southern Tier Grain Modeler Supply, including new announcements to take your trackside industries to the next level. For more, check out their website at tullymodels.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott, so glad you could join us. It's time once again for Talking Ops with Don Irace, and joining us from his tropical oasis in Sebastian, Florida, Don Irace.
Good evening, everybody, from the Sunshine State.
The sunshine and the warmth state, but...
Oh, it is warm.
You just escaped. You were just up here hanging out with us through the holiday season. So you got a little bit of the chill that we're getting up here in the Northeast, but
yes,
back down in Florida. But yeah, we got to do some operating. That was a really highlight.
Get over to the BNSF Montana division and get the wheels turning over there. That was nice.
Did you get Columbia Falls done?
I did. Of course I did. I always do. I don't leave it going. I won't leave until I get it done. I had it done by, I think, maybe about 15 minutes after. I was just getting ready to put everything back together when you were leaving.
That job is talked about. I mean, we mention it a lot. We reference that job a lot. And one thing I've noticed, and you were offering it to me, I was offering it back to you. I said, now you're up here, you get a chance to run it. You run it, and because I can do it any other time. But that job is a workout, isn't it? It's not only is it. It's just like it's physically demanding. You're up, down, on the step, moving over. So it's a physically demanding job and a little mentally demanding, but it's a great operating job for sure.
Hands down. If you like switching, that is by far the best job on his layout. I mean, it's you leave the yard, you go up there, and you're just in there. That's that one big industry that I keep talking about. That you can keep a guy busy there for an hour, 2 hours. He's had guys there all night. He's had guys that have been there all night and never finished it. So it's just that big job that you can lose a guy in all night long, But it's fun, and normally when I come up there, I get a chance to do it. But I did offer it to you, and you refused.
You did. No, I said, you know what? We'll go to the senior guy. He can take it, and I'll take the extra. The extra, I think, took me an hour or more, or maybe hour and a half to get out of the Spokane yard and it up to Essex to drop it off, and had some fun playing with that. But I was absolute low priority train, so I sat in sidings for a long time. But gave me a chance to chat with folks like you and Mark and Mike and everybody else. But it's part of that operating crew, and great to be back running the BNSF Montana division again. Glad you were able to get in some operating while you're up visiting for the holiday season. So, and back down to the warmth, which I'm sure you're happy to be.
Oh yeah. Like I said, I was up there to surprise my father for Christmas, and he had no idea we were coming. And me and my wife dressed up as Mr. and Mrs. Claus with the beards and the whole thing. And he had no clue I bought one of the medical arrangements. And when he opened up the door, he had no idea it was me. None.
That's awesome.
And I handed it to him. I pulled down the beard. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" So he was all happy. It was like probably one of the best Christmases he's had.
Awesome stuff. Yeah. Glad you were able to surprise Dad and get up here and make a great trip out of it. So,
yep.
But now you're back in Florida, back with the mic in front of you. We're here to talk about operations, and we brought along a guest. who I haven't had the opportunity to operate. And we should make it clear, I do pick on him when we get on his live stream that I've never been invited, but that's not true. But we'll tell the truth on this podcast at least. But Don, you've been able to operate it, and that is the Riverside Transfer of Heath Hurwitz. And Heath is here to join us. Heath, glad you were able to join us tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Glad to see you here, Keith.
Glad to have you here, and want to dive in because I've been watching your live streams. What do you call it? Trains and Tech, right? Did I get the name right?
I do, yeah. One of the parts of the hobby that really interests me is the technology side of it. So I, like to bring a little bit of tech and sometimes chaos to the trains.
We have a lot of fun watching your live streams. They're highly entertaining. We're going to leave a link to them in our show notes around thelayout.com/209. It's fairly regular on Wednesday night. How long have you been doing your live streams?
I actually started them in about April or May of 2020. So it's been a while. It hasn't always been on Wednesday nights. It's switched around a little bit, but yeah, I've been trying to make sure it happens every week just to create an environment, people to come together and talk about trains.
It's a great way for us to get to know your railroad as well. Let's just guess before we dive into our topic, which is going to be what you've learned and how your railroad has changed through operating other layouts and your layout visits to other folks. Tell us a little bit about the Riverside Transfer.
So I live in New York City on the west side of the island, and there is the last remaining transfer bridge on the 60th Street Yard called the 69th Street Transfer Bridge. And I used to walk that park, ride my bike down that park all the time. So when it came time to come up with a story for my layout, I just kept coming back to that transfer bridge and the time when New York City was a big hub for railroading and a lot of the freight came in through barges into the city. And I knew that was what I wanted to model.
Tell us a little bit about how you started to model this, because we know that you've made some serious changes, especially over the last, year and a half, or maybe a little bit longer than that. But talk about what you were doing to model the Riverside Transfer prior to all these changes.
I think we need to go back a little bit further before I actually started the modeling part, because I did spend a lot of time on the computer coming up with various different track plans. And when I started this, before I really understood operations and really knew where I wanted to go, I spent all my time just trying to get as much track into the room as I possibly could. And I would just, more track, figure out how to lay one industry on top of another industry, and just kept designing and designing and designing. And then one day I said, hey, let's print this out on paper, lay it down on the ground, and see what it looks like. And I looked at this mess on my floor and I said, this isn't right. Something's not right. But I didn't understand at the time what it was. I eventually got to a point where I designed Riverside Transfer 1.0, and I ran it for about 6 months, mostly myself. But anytime I would run trains on it, things just didn't work. I had a turnout on the other side of the peninsula that you couldn't reach from the place that the operator was standing. And it just didn't fit the story I was trying to tell. And I asked myself, I said, okay, do I stay with version 1? Or do I take a step back, commit to starting over from scratch, and build something that more meets what I want to do now, and start taking in all of the things that I've learned. And the more layouts that I visit, the more information I started taking in. Eventually, I said, I have to do it. I have to start over. So what you see is version 2.0 now. And I think it does a pretty good job of telling the story that I'm interested in telling.
Were you always in N scale, or did you actually think about maybe doing HO scale at the time when you started?
So since I got back into model railroading in 2019, I have always been committed to modeling in N scale. I am also a collector, and I collect trains in HO scale, G scale, S scale, O scale, Z scale. I'm really into collecting circus trains, but for my operations, I knew that in order to get the amount of movement and the amount of things that interest me into a layout that I would have to do it in N scale.
I wasn't really sure if you ever tried to dabble when you first started with HO and how you ended up with N, but after operating at your layout, I can totally understand why you are N scale.
Yeah, I was definitely concerned that when I chose N scale, that you wouldn't really be able to operate it like you did an HO scale layout. I thought that the smaller size was going to introduce complications that would just make the level of switching that I'm interested in just completely impossible. I was very happily surprised when I actually discovered that uncoupling and coupling was very similar, in some cases easier than HO scale. And, cars stayed on the track and the engines were reliable, and it's been going much better than I expected it ever would.
What was your exposure to operations prior to Riverside Transfer 1.0 before you started all this?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I grew up in Yardley, Pennsylvania, which is right across the river from Trenton, New Jersey. So my experience with trains was Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, and SEPTA. And none of those have freight. So in my world, everything was passenger trains. And every train event that I went to, I'd watch the trains running in circles and circles. And when people would talk about operations, I said, oh, so operations is running your trains in circles and circles. And when you get tired of the one train, you take that train physically off the layout, you put a different set of cars on, and then you run it in circles again. So I didn't have any idea what I was getting into when I started going down this rabbit hole. I was very fortunate. I reached out to somebody. The first email didn't get answered, but I waited. I took my time. I emailed again about 6 months later, and I don't know exactly why, but somehow I got a spot to come operate on a railroad, and I had no idea what was happening. I was with somebody that was basically my pilot and would tell me, okay, go forward. Okay, stop. You just ran that red signal. You shouldn't have done that. And that was my introduction. What I found out later was that the guy that I emailed that gave me a chance to start this operations journey has written books and articles on operations, has, one of the premier operating layouts in this area. And I thought that every layout was like that. And that was what I actually initially started modeling Riverside Transfer 1.0 after. So I had an 8-foot by 9-foot room, and he has I think 40-foot by 40-foot basement. And I thought that to have an operating layout, that's what I needed. I needed this big empire with all these trains and all this track. And I learned through time that not every layout is the same.
So you're saying that the Riverside Transfer 1.0 may have had a little bit too much going on? Is that where that ended up?
Riverside Transfer 1.0 had a lot in a very little space. I thought I needed a staging yard. I thought I, needed industries back to back to back, that every track had to have a spur off of it. I thought every yard had to have an engine facility and classification tracks and arrival departure tracks. And in an 8-foot space, even in N scale, you just can't fit all of that in. And I didn't understand at the time that it wasn't the track that was important, that it was the story that was important. And once I started understanding more and started visiting other people's layouts and hearing their stories, I had an interesting moment when I first started operating where I went up to the layout owner and I said, thank you so much for having me operate on your layout. And he responded back to me and said, thank you for helping me bring my layout to life. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I mean, I just kind of ran trains from one place to another. What did he mean, bring the layout to life? And it was kind of partly through that conversation and other conversations that I started understanding people weren't building layouts that lived in their basements. People were building layouts that were a part of a much bigger transportation system, part of it that, we knew nothing about, but we were sending stuff out in that direction and somehow stuff was coming back. And it was a new world to me. I didn't quite follow what was happening, but I knew it was something bigger than what I understood in the moment. And I'm the kind of person that when I don't quite understand something, I kind of start going down that rabbit hole. And it kind of took me to where I am today, which is very deep in a very dark hole, but I'm having a good time. So I'm staying here and staying warm and going to keep going.
Don, it kind of sounds like a saying I've heard you use, which is nice railroad. What does it do? And that sounds like the kind of what Heath discovered there.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm an advocate of that. I mean, I started out pretty much the same way. It was just me and my father. We just put some track down. We were building it, and we just started operating. And then I got people coming over, and my wife, hairdressing customers, had husbands into model railroad, and they found out about it. They had to come over. Next thing you know, I got this huge empire in my basement and 15 new friends.
So Heath, as you start to get this more information and you've got this Riverside Transfer 1.0 and you have this and you're starting to realize and see the bigger picture of what these layouts should be or what you want the Riverside Transfer to be. Talk about some of the changes that you start to implement as you're learning that or diving down that rabbit hole, as you mentioned.
The first thing that I did was I put together a PowerPoint presentation as if I was going to give a clinic on the Riverside Transfer. I wrote down what areas the trains would be going through. I started writing down, where they might be delivering to specific industries. I started designing different aspects of the layout. And then once I completed this kind of large PDF, I just started taking things out of it. I started removing industries. Originally, my idea was I was going to have 2 levels and there was going to be a turnback loop and there would be a peninsula and there's going to be all this stuff. And I just started taking things away one at a time until I got to what really interested me and the story that I wanted to tell. And once it all went away, it kind of became something again that I didn't necessarily understand, but I knew that it was better than what I had before. So now I had these more simplified areas, and now I had to start building back what each of those areas did. So I guess it kind of, I got a little bit into this cycle of adding things and taking things away and adding things and taking things away. And I did that for about 6 months between the end of Riverside Transfer 1.0 and the start of Riverside Transfer 2.0.
A lot of people don't experience that. You know what I mean? It's like, even thing with me, I mean, I started building layout, just building it. I didn't have any plan. I just started laying track and building bench work and laying more track and try to follow the Providence Worcester Railroad as much as I could, on the Northeast Corridor and all that stuff. But and then it just morphed into what it ended up being before I, left and came down here.
I wouldn't say my layout is prototypical. My story of my layout is actually after New York Central, combined and became Penn Central. And in my case, Penn Central just never existed. They didn't take over the area that I model. So I didn't have a prototype. I was just kind of gathering little pieces here and there and making it up. And I think that was, I wouldn't say a mistake, but being as I understood so little about freight operations, I got very lost at the time. And I think it was really through going and seeing other people's layouts and understanding how, like, somebody would say, like, oh, I don't have any 60-foot boxcars on a layout, for example. And I'd be like, well, why don't you? And they'd be like, well, in this area and this era and, this time in the industries, 60-foot boxcars wouldn't fit on this layout. So I don't have them. And I was like, but I thought model railroading was, it's my layout. I can do whatever I want. And they're like, well, yeah, I want to model this area in this era and have what fits in that area. And I was like, oh. And then this large collection of N scale stuff that I had kind of no longer fit. So, of course, I did what every model railroader hates doing. And I went out and I bought more trains and more locomotives. And yeah, now everything on my layout is 4-axle locomotives and 40-foot or less rolling stock.
Right. But in actuality, being a freelance railroad, you can do whatever you want if you didn't stick to a certain era. Like a lot of people are freelancing their modern day, so they'll run all those big cars and all that stuff where you've got a freelance layout, but you've narrowed it down to a certain time frame, and that's what you're going to stay in. That's where your guardrails are in that certain era.
Yeah, and I do stray from that. So, for example, I really like the old 36-foot yellow billboard reefers. They weren't run in 1968. But, on an N-scale layout where it's really hard to read the numbers on all the cars, sometimes it's a little easier to identify a car if it's got a big billboard on the side of it. So I made some exceptions, allowed things to stretch a little bit from some of the specifics. So I would not say I am anywhere near a prototypical modeler, but I'm prototypically influenced. I try and make things exist in some reality if it's not a specific reality.
You mentioned that one takeaway from the second operating session. You mentioned the first one kind of laid out this expectation that you couldn't meet, and with the size of it. In the second, talk about some more takeaways as you were getting out there and operating more. What were you learning, and in a sense, how has that helped? How have you applied those lessons?
Yeah, train movement was something that I found very interesting because you'd go to one layout and you'd look at their car cards and waybills, and they were completely different than another layout. And then one layout would hand you a timetable and tell you, okay, now follow this timetable. And then another person would hand you a switch list and say, okay, now follow this switch list. And I didn't understand how all of those things were essentially doing the same thing, but in different ways. So when I started trying to figure out how to apply this train movement to my layout, again, it was that moment of, okay, I know what that is like, and I know what that is like, but I don't know how to apply those things to my own layout. I actually was able to get on with somebody who understands and knows car cards and waybills. And they actually started talking me through how to create my very first waybill. And they said, okay, so what is that boxcar hauling? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, there's something in that boxcar and it needs to go from where it was loaded to where it's going to empty. And it kind of like hit me like, oh, that's what the to and the from and all of the information on this waybill was. I didn't understand that. I just saw, send it here. And I'd be like, oh, okay, like, make sure the car gets there. It's one thing to go to somebody's layout and be a good operator and be able to look at a waybill or look at a switch list and get that car from where it currently is to where it needs to go at the end of the session, to owning your own layout and having to create that plan from nothing. And I'm learning that in multiple different areas of this hobby, that the work that you see when you go to an operating session doesn't start at the start of the operating session. It started months and months and months ago, where that layout owner started where I'm at now with nothing and has built this up over time. So I am getting the benefit of their experience, not even realizing that they're all along the same journey that I'm on. They're just much further along than I am.
And did you find that a little bit more challenging, being the fact that you're lacking a solid prototype? For example, Don's got a good reference point. He's got the Providence and Worcester. He knows what goes to Denison Lubricants. He knows what goes to his paper mill. He knows what goes to those industries because he, as Eric Hansman likes to say, he lets the prototype be his guide. But for you, you're doing a lot of freelancing with your railroad. Do you find that more challenging to be able to lay that out and still remain a bit plausible as you're starting to put that together?
I definitely did. And I started using tools that I no longer use, but tools that helped me and guided what was possible. JMRI, which I love and still use for certain aspects of the railroad, has a whole module called Operations Pro, and it's all about creating the train movement. So what I was able to do was put a bunch of boxcars into this program, put a bunch of industry tracks into this program, and kind of hit a button and see what it suggested. And once I started getting some suggestions from that, once I started going back to my original story and saying, okay, what would be getting shipped here? Like, what would kind of make sense? I was able to combine those two pieces of information and start understanding, like, okay, a train will go from here to here, and then a boxcar on that train will leave that train, get on another train and go to this other location. And then I needed to figure out actually how to document this to then transfer it to other people. Because now I understood what I wanted to do, or I understood what was possible. But if I was going to have somebody else come over who didn't know the names of the locations on my layout, who didn't know the names of the industries, how was I going to tell them now what to do? And then I had another problem to solve. And it almost feels like, in telling this journey that I'm on, that I went from solving one problem to solving another problem that created a new problem. Then I had to solve the next problem, which created 2 or 3 more problems. So I feel very lucky. A lot of times I would bring those problems to other layout owners, and I'd ask them to explain how they solved that problem on their layout. And if you ask enough people, you kind of eventually get an answer that will maybe apply to your layout. You might have to change a little bit of it, but you can start taking things from different layouts and say, okay, the way they moved that train and the way they explained it, I can use that piece of information. And then I started basically, numbering things. So instead of just being named, everything started having a number. So somebody said, okay, I need to go from 11 to 14. Well, you got to go, 14's higher than 11, so I know I got to go that way. And things started growing. The rabbit hole was still there, and I still felt buried by it. But as my community grew, as I got to go to more layouts, as I got to ask more questions, people were very generous, providing me with feedback and information that I was able to apply to what I was doing.
That's good. I'm glad you brought that up, because you don't understand how important it is to, don't be home and be a lone wolf. If you want to get into something like this, get in your community, reach out to your, people in your area, and get invited to these sessions, because you pick up so much more. I mean, I've been doing this for years, and I've gone to layouts as long as I've been doing it, and I still pick up something. It's always something that you go to another layout and say, gee, something? I never thought about doing that, and I just can't stress enough to really get out there in the community like you did and learn this stuff.
Yeah, my area has an operations weekend called Island Ops. And once I learned about it, I was going to go. Like, that was a great opportunity to go see 4 more layouts that I hadn't been to in the area. And I went and I did that for 2 years. And my layout was kind of getting to the point where I was almost confident enough to invite people to, come operate on it. And I said, you know what? Let's do it. So I said, hey, would you come check out my layout and see if it's far enough along that you would consider it for Island Ops? And I became the first Manhattan N scale layout that was a part of Island Ops. And I learned a lot, though. People that had never been here before that I didn't know came to my layout, and they were willing to provide feedback. And not just, oh, that's wrong, or, oh, you need to fix that, but actual constructive feedback. They gave me feedback that I could actually use and apply to the layout and make the layout better for the next session. Multiple people pointed out that I have 3 staging tracks, and where they entered the layout was kind of in an awkward place. And through all of these different suggestions, I eventually said, okay, there's definitely something here that I need to look at. I've gotten the same comment from multiple people. It's time to make a change. And I was a little concerned because, I went from Riverside Transfer 1.0 to 2.0, and now I'm at 2.0, and people are saying I need to make changes. Do I need to rip this out? What do I need to do? Once I kind of calmed down and, took a bigger picture look at everything, I realized I only needed to move 2 switches and 2 pieces of track. And I think the layout works so much better now. And I never would have gotten to this point if I hadn't opened the layout up to other people and taken the risk to have people that I looked up to and I learned from to actually come operate on my layout and help me get to the next level.
Feedback is very important when it comes to operating layouts. I mean, I expect it, as long as I've been doing. Like I said, I don't mind people. If you see something that you think it could be done a little better, just bring it up. I have no problem when I go to other people's layouts. I think owners expect feedback because they want to make everybody happy. Everybody wants to have a good time. They want guys to come back again. So in order to do that, you have to kind of listen to all the feedback and stuff. And like I said, I have no problem with it. And I don't think anybody's layout ever been to would ever have a problem with it.
Well, it's like most things. You don't want to work in a vacuum, right? You want to be able to get that feedback. And because I'm sure, Heath, for you, what was at that end was probably not a problem when it was just you. You probably never noticed it. It never really became a problem. It's when you get somebody else's perspective that really starts to open that up. And then now it gives you a new way of looking at it.
When I would test a new train or, a new way of doing something, when I was in here by myself, it always worked. There was never anybody in the way. I never had to wait for anything. And all of a sudden, I would get 2 or 3 people in here and realize, oh, wait, this doesn't work because those 2 people now need to stand in the same exact spot at the same exact time. So then I started to have to figure out, like, okay, if I delay this, or if I add a little bit more work here at the beginning so that they won't get to that spot at the same time. And things started changing. I had an experience where I had 7 people in this small room at a time. And just to give you a sense of how many 7 people is the most I will ever really have in here is 4 operators and myself. And that's pretty much the limit. So when we had 7 in here, it was a good time, but it was a lot. But I found out that you get too many locomotives running on the layout and things are going to short out. We found out that one locomotive that never had a problem when I ran it by myself was actually drawing too much current, and there was actually an issue to fix. So it doesn't just bring up issues of operations or issues of track work, but you learn which piece of rolling stock works or doesn't work, and which one might need a little bit of love and attention.
Yeah, so like one of the points that I'll say it because I was there during Island Ops, and I noticed that his interchange traffic wasn't really. It was basically his surefire way of messing up the yard master is what it was, because he would just pull. All of a sudden, I was working the yard, everything was going good, and I don't think he liked it was going good because it was going too good for him. And then he starts yanking these interchange trains out of the 3 tracks behind me and in front of me, and then just start backing them into the yard. And I'm like, well, what are these things? Oh, these are the interchange trains. Well, I mean, to me, the interchange train should be coming from the other end of the layout, not from the same end. So I think that's what got this kind of ball rolling. But I got to say, I did have a good time there and can't wait to get back there again.
Yeah, and from that feedback, I had my first operations session this past weekend where the interchange trains actually did something. They weren't just there to make Don's life or whoever the yardmaster's life was difficult, but they were actually bringing cars onto the layout that needed to go to industries during that session. It was a good lesson in continuing to evaluate what's working and what's not working. And I think the layout is so much better today than it was at Island Ops last year. And I'm looking forward to what it's going to be at Island Ops this year, and just, continue to grow, more and more as I learn more and as more people provide their feedback.
Was there anything in particular that you thought you needed to have as part of your operating scheme that you found out once it was operated that was not what you needed, or something that needed to be completely changed? I mean, we talk about the interchange trains that Don had pointed out to you, but was there anything else there that you really said, boy, I thought we needed this, or and then ended up being completely different take from what actually happened?
I originally thought that I had to have a turnback loop or a way to run trains continuously on the layout. I didn't think that there was any possibility of having a layout that people would come to if I couldn't just turn a train on and let it run. This idea of a point-to-point layout never made sense to me in the beginning. And then people started saying, but trains go from one spot to another. They don't ever go in a circle in the real world. So I think that was the hardest thing for me to give up, was the need for trains to be able to run in a circle. Now, I will say, if you come and visit, I do have an O scale loop and a G scale loop that does run continuously around this studio, but it's up overhead and it's for fun. But yeah, a point-to-point layout opened up so many different possibilities that really enabled this to exist. This would not be here if I didn't give up the loop.
We talked earlier about layout visits, and you talked about the things that you learned and that you applied. As you were visiting other layouts and operating other layouts, were there things that you saw there that you said the opposite? You said, nope, that's not for me. And you've done a great job so far of not naming names. So I think we can go into this, right? So was there things that you observed that you said, okay, cool for you, but not for me?
Absolutely. And yes, I will not name any names. I am definitely a car card and waybill person. There are layouts that I operate on that I enjoy operating on that use switch lists. But for me, I like handing the operator a stack of cards and basically allowing them to be the agent. So the agent role is something that's not really talked about in model railroading. When I was at Bay Rails last year, there was a layout that actually had an agent position. And that position took the car cards, created a switch list, and then handed it to the operators. But since most layouts don't have that, you're either getting car cards or you're getting the finished switch list. And for me, I like the car cards. So that's what I have on my layout. One of the other things is I like a bit of chaos. I'm not afraid of so much happening at the same time that you kind of lose track of what you're doing. To me, that's just life. That's just the way things are. And yes, this is a hobby. This should be enjoyable. It shouldn't be stressful. But I think there's an opportunity, at least I take the opportunity, to allow things to be a little chaotic in this environment, stretch my brain a little bit, make myself work a little bit harder. And I think it makes me better able to handle other situations by sort of playing in this environment of chaos. So again, love going to these layouts, but some layouts I wish there was a little more activity, a little more chaos, more things happening at the same time. So I do try and add that element to my layout. I do hear frequently, your layout would be better if you just took 10% of the cars off the layout. And I'm like, okay, if they're only saying 10%, then I'm only overstressing the situation by about 10%. They're not telling me, they're not saying 50%. They're just saying 10%. So I'm like, okay, that's okay. I'm okay pushing somebody 10%, over their threshold.
I would say that you're giving 110%. That's how I would measure that, Heath. You're giving 110%.
10% ain't a lot, that's for sure. That's not really nothing to sneeze at either, But I'll tell you what, I named myself as one of your feedback guys. So now when you came and operated my layout, you gave me feedback. Do you remember what that feedback was?
I'm still trying to convince you to lower inland paper by 6 inches so that you can have some of those industry tracks be just a little bit longer.
Yeah, it ain't happening.
Feedback taken and filed accordingly. Yeah,
actually, believe it or not, I don't know. I'm John. He's got that new Rapido 44-ton switcher. I think it's 44-ton switcher that he just put in there, and that thing runs beautiful. And I'm like, wow, that thing would look really good in my paper mill. And there's 2 reasons why. Because it would look real good because I like them switches, and 2, it's a lot shorter than the S2 I'm running now, which may give you just enough room to pull 2 of those slurry cars out of that backtrack at once.
Yeah, so we give Don a little bit of a hard time, but there's kind of a joke that when Don comes to your layout, he's going to suggest some change that is going to take a little bit more work than you really want to do, but it's actually really good advice. So, you come away saying, oh, like, why did he have to suggest that? Because I know he's right, but now I got to spend the next month figuring out how to actually make it happen. So it's good to have people like Don that are willing to guide you in the right direction. And, at the same time, I would have been much happier if Don didn't come over and give me suggestions.
You would have been able to slip back to that ignorant bliss that, it's once you can't go back, can you?
And that is a very interesting way of putting it. But model railroading for me significantly changed after that first operation session. And from that moment, I couldn't go back. I had seen behind the curtain, as they say,
Yeah.
and a whole new world opened up to me. And it was one I wanted to pursue. So jumped both feet in. People always tell me, "Oh, did you test that before trying it?" And I said, "Oh, no, I just jumped right in and, wired half my layout. I'll figure out if it works eventually."
Yep, eventually.
But I think that's part of this hobby, is that there are many, many different hobbies within a hobby. And once you see certain parts of it, you find what part you gravitate to, what part you like. You find similar people that like those same things. And in some cases, you find people that like the opposite of what you like and realize that, I like the tech part. He likes the scenery. Now I have somebody to do scenery on my layout because I sure don't want to do it. So this community just comes together, and I don't even, this community comes together, and it's something I didn't expect. It came out of a time, 2020, that we all remember, that we spent a lot of time, I guess you can say, in our basements in 2020 by ourselves, which is what I thought model railroading really was. But then as we came out of that time, and as I met more and more people, I realized this isn't a lone wolf hobby. This is actually a hobby that, we can share both through YouTube, through podcasting, through operations, through many different avenues, and, sharing a common enjoyment.
We all went lone wolf there for a while during that activity. But I mean, the nice thing, I don't think people really realize how big model railroad operations really is. I mean, this is huge. I mean, you have all these groups of guys come house, or even people that operate your layouts weekly, and different guys got different talents, and that's what I like about it. Because if you're a little rough in one spot, you can say, "Hey, look, can you come over and show me this?" And can I, then maybe he might need my help or something like this. But as a community, we all can lean on each other for help and improve what we do.
Absolutely. And, I think, we go back to 2020 and we were kind of alone, but then it, like you said, kicked off so many things. It kicked off you doing the live streams, Heath. And, for us tri-state railroader guys, it started with a Zoom call where we were all hanging out. And then that was really the inspiration to kick off Around the Layout podcast. And it really started to help in building the community. And I know that not only are the people learning when they watch your live stream, but you're learning as well. I mean, there's tons of, there's obviously the ribbing and the fun that we have in that chat. The chat is probably one of the big highlights. You were very acknowledging of the chat room, which is good. But there's a lot of great information being shared there as well. So not only operating sessions and being able to go to other people's layouts, but then also using this new technology to learn and share that information too.
I think people didn't realize how much they missed operations and having guys at their house once COVID hit, because after that, it just kind of exploded after that, because we all couldn't wait to get back into it again. And everybody just went into it full bore. And I personally, I think it's grown way more than it was before COVID, to be honest with you.
I'm very fortunate in the area that I live that there are a lot of operations-based layouts, to the point where I may get an invite once to a layout, and just not be able to get back to it because there are so many good operators in this area. And then I learn, oh, this person has a layout. They operate every month. And I didn't even, know that they had something going on. So there's a lot more out there, I think, that we even realize. And it's interesting because you are getting invited to somebody's house, to somebody's personal space. In most cases, it's, their money and their time that they put into their layout. So it's a very interesting community of sharing. And I've really enjoyed my time in it and what I've learned. And I do hope that I'm able to give back, and, people that want to operate on my railroad, I will set up sessions, anytime people want, because I do think that while that person might not have invited me to, their specific layout, by having them over to my layout, we're creating that circle and that cycle and that community. And that's what I want to be a part of and keep growing.
Yep.
Well, it gives me another opportunity to say one of my favorite sayings, which is the hobby is so much better shared. And you've definitely been able to do that. And then you've shared kind of across the country. I know that operating weekends are kind of a highlight for Heath. You talked about island ops, but I've also seen you in Syracuse, and then I know you've traveled to the Midwest and beyond. Talk about some of the operating weekends and just where you've been able to go out and operate.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to get to go to some 2, 3, 4 day operations weekends. Basically, what they do is you'll come in, let's say on a Friday night. They might have one session that night, then you'll have 2 sessions on a Saturday and 1 session on a Sunday, giving you time to head out on a Sunday night. One ops weekend I got invited to just by being a member of the OPSIG. The OPSIG is the Operations Special Interest Group of the NMRA, and for $10 a year, you can get a lot of information on operations, ask questions, get feedback. So that has also been a really great resource for me. And through that community, I got invited out to Bay Rails and got to meet and operate a lot of the layouts that I had only seen through YouTube or through other various means. So the community exists all over the country. I've been to Minneapolis. I've been to, as you mentioned, I've been to Central New York. But there are these weekends all over the country. And I'm fortunate that I've been able to get some invites and been able to take the time off to go travel and learn and meet in person people that I may have only known online, as well as meet new people that then become new friends as well.
How to do it. We have the Cocoa RPM down here, and an op session set up for Wednesday with a few guys coming down to the RPM, and sounds like it's going to be fun. And they reached out to me because they were going to be here, and we do something together. A couple of these guys I've never even met, but I know them, but I've never met them face to face. So to meet guys face to face is good. It's great. I like it.
Yeah, it's funny too. Like you know them, but you don't know them. But in some cases, like you'll hear their voice, off in the distance. You'll be like, oh, I know that voice. And one of the big events coming up is Amherst in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I love going there for that weekend because that is another place where people come together and we get to say hello and talk to people that, you may only see once a year, but there's a friendship there that lasts throughout that time. And you come back and you pick up right where you left off, and shows are another great place that brings the community together.
Yeah, it's like the big reunion. And I think in model railroading, I don't think it takes 7 degrees to find yourself back around again. It really isn't. There's not that much separation. It's a big community. It's also a very tight community. A lot of people that know a lot of people. And all of this, and going back to where you were, stick your neck out a little bit and look what you learn. You go from, Riverside Transfer 1.0 and now a totally new look on model railroading.
Absolutely. Riverside 2.0 it's really this may sound cliche or this may sound funny, but Riverside 2.0 is a growth for me as a person. And it's opened my eyes to new things, taught me new technology, allowed me to meet new friends, and just another path on my journey of model railroading.
I was glad to get you. I mean, you had a chance to come down here and operate on my layout and on John's layout, and I think you had a good time. I know we always enjoyed people coming down. Ray's made the trip down. He's done a 24-hour, thing just to get down here. That was pretty brave, but he did it, and I was glad to have him down here. And it was just it's just a good time, no matter what. I mean, it's always a good time. You can never not have fun operating model railroads.
Agreed. Well, Heath, want to thank you so much for coming by and talking ops with Don and I. And for the folks listening, all the links to the things that we talked about, including some photos of the Riverside Transfer and a link to Trains and Tech, which is Heath's Wednesday night live stream on YouTube, can all be found at aroundthelayout.com/209. Do us a favor if you liked what you heard today and think that somebody could benefit from hearing about Heath's journey. Please do us a favor and share this episode. Heath, thanks again for joining us from the city that never sleeps.
Ray, thank you so much for having me. And just to make it official, Ray, you are invited. Come join me on my layout. Come run some trains, and we'll have a really great time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode. Check out past shows and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.